Hello, this is Dr. Gear, and this is Chapter 3 in our series of discussions around educational leadership and school personnel management. This topic is about recruitment. Last session we discussed enrollment, and it leads to the need for recruitment along with some other factors such as retirements, people changing jobs, and other such conditions. So one of the things that I would suggest to you is that recruitment is ongoing in nature, and it's something that you should keep in the forefront of your mind as an educational leader, because you will need to continue to staff your building and or your district, whatever level you ascend to over time, and as a result you need to continually keep an eye on the recruitment process. One of the things that I would suggest to you is that you need to keep an eye on potential prospects. That means not only in the teaching ranks, but do you have potential management staffing in your custodial units, in your bus and transportation, other areas of the school district, as well as at the building level. For instance, do you have a custodian that might be able to lead the afternoon shift with some growth? So my point being that recruitment and the development of talent is one of the primary jobs of the educational leader, and especially the principal. Be cognizant of a couple things. I will tell you this from experience, that oftentimes it appears to be a good thing to get into the recruiting market early. But one of the things that I was always concerned about, because I had been burned, so to speak, a couple times by hiring early, is that people will continue their job search, and they oftentimes will use their position with your district as a bargaining chip. That is, they would jump ship on you, and oftentimes right before the beginning of the school year. One of the things that I would suggest to you is that as you recruit and sign up a candidate for a position, one of the questions you need to ask them is simply, are you going to continue to look for a job? And if they indicate that they are, then obviously there's some ramifications to that. The other thing that I would suggest to you is that as you sign them up, you say to them that ethically they are now bound to the district. It's not a guarantee that someone might not still sign up with you and continue their job search, but I contend that if somebody tells you that they want to be part of your district, they sign up, they say to you, I'm not going to continue my job search, and then they do, that's probably not a candidate that you want in your organization anyway. So be cognizant of the time frame for recruitment. As you probably know, there's really some windows that are considered hot in terms of recruiting. The first is probably springtime, when you're getting your seniors, people who are going to graduate from college, are out actively searching for a position. The other time frame that you might consider is right before school ends into the early weeks of summer. Generally, there will be some movement at that period of time as people move from district to district, retire, and other such considerations. Lastly, I believe that there's a cycle of hiring that occurs right around the beginning of August and lasts until school starts, and perhaps in the South with a different beginning of school being earlier that that's pushed back a hair, but it's a late movement of people between districts and will put pressure on you as a human resource professional to recruit and engage people right before school starts. One of the things that I will point out to you here, and it comes up several times in this chapter, is that recruitment becomes much easier as your reputation as a good leader spreads. Also, what is the reputation of your school and district? One of the things that you need to consider as an educational leader is how do you enhance that reputation. I'm going on to the next slide. Issues that impact recruitment. I'm on slide number 3 at this point. There are a number of methods that go along with the recruitment process that I'll get to in a second. But one of the things that I would point out to you in terms of issues that impact recruitment is that there are a number of different factors that impact recruitment for you as a human resources professional or as a principal. And amongst those are affirmative action, which you have already seen and discussed often in the last chapter, and that simply is the social justice agenda of civil rights and other attending federal implications that are based upon the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. The other is things that you may want to think about is the reputation and policies of the school district, the nature of the position to be filled, in that some are easier than others to fill, and we'll talk about that in some detail. One of the biggest fallacies that I think surround the recruitment process and human resource issues is this whole thing around salary and fringe benefits. One of the things that I would purport is that the reputation and policies of the school district and the school are very important because that gives people a general impression of the district, and generally salary structures are close enough that you're going to be able to compete as a hiring director as long as your school has a good reputation or your district does. Do you know what the reputation of your district is? Do you know what the reputation of your building is? What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? And one of the things that I would point out to you is that in this whole idea around the reputation and policies of the school district and how they filter down to the individual school is the idea of order and discipline and mentoring and induction practices, because those will often be concerns that are expressed by candidates that you are recruiting. So I would suggest to you that you need to be prepared for questions around those two particular areas. Another issue is the position to be filled. I would contend that there is a big difference between filling a high-level science position in the high school, for instance physics, as compared to filling an elementary school grade 2 position. You will have hundreds of candidates most likely applying for the grade 2 position, and certainly a handful of people, perhaps if you're lucky, applying for that high-level science position. One thing that I would just point out at this point, talking to you as a hiring director, is that I oftentimes would give candidates about a day to decide whether or not to accept a position. The reason that I bring that up is that that impacts recruitment generally, in the sense that if somebody accepts a position, continues to uh, search for a job, or uses your offer for position to better bargain with another district, that's holding up your whole recruitment process in essence, because there is a facade that you have a candidate in place, but you really don't. So one of the things I would suggest you is think hard about the timing of when you're offering the job to a candidate, and be very frank with him or her that you are now expecting them to occupy the position that they are accepting. Moving on to the next slide. Methods of recruitment. There are a number of different ways that we can recruit personnel for our district. The first one is the internal search. Well, there are lots of people who are working in the district that we may make good candidates for whatever position we may have available. For instance, do you have long-term substitutes, good student teachers who've been in the building, perhaps some teacher aides who have certification or who are working on it, that might be good candidates for a position in your organization? One of the things that I would suggest you under the heading of referrals is that it is important to get the word out to various entities in order to recruit the best candidates for the positions that you may have open. By that, I would say make sure that other principals, the assistant superintendent level, are asking the right questions of you about your staffing needs, but also that you are pushing them to point out to their colleagues at various professional meetings that you are having this opening or that opening, and oftentimes that word of mouth at those levels will generate some fruitful candidates. One of the things I also would suggest to you as a principal or a person in charge of hiring is that you have to keep in mind the overall needs of the district and school. By that I mean there are a number of needs in the area of extracurriculars and athletics and other such activities that are crucial to a quality school program, and I would suggest to you that you need to understand those needs, even if you are an elementary or middle school principal feeding a high school athletic program or a middle level athletic program, the theater at the high school. It might be student government at the middle school. At the elementary school, it might be leading clubs. But as a person who is in charge of recruiting personnel for various positions, it's important that you holistically look at the needs of the district. And certainly one of the things I would look for in candidates as a method of discerning between different candidates who might look pretty equal on paper and also interview and perhaps even teach a lesson very well is how could they contribute in those areas. Because if they can, that could be the difference between that person and other such candidates. One of the places that I would suggest that you need to focus in on in terms of recruitment are colleges and universities. Obviously, they are having graduates that oftentimes can fulfill your needs. The other thing that I would suggest you is that you develop a relationship with the professors in these colleges and universities, and as a result, you can give them a call on the phone and say, look, I need a math teacher, or I need a third grade teacher. Who do you know? Who have you seen that's really good? And they are often a good referral source to take a look at various candidates. The other part that I would suggest about colleges and universities is that they oftentimes have pretty sophisticated career services departments, and these departments oftentimes post positions free of charge and have a pretty large following of their alumni. So it is a good place for a human resources professional to find people. I want to go back for a second to the internal search and discuss for a minute a phenomenon that I'd like to point out about an internal candidate. One of the problems that I have seen over the years with an internal candidate going up for a position within an organization they're already a member of is what I would call the halo effect for other candidates. That is, you know this candidate and you know that person's warts, so to speak, their deficiencies, their areas of weakness and growth. Whereas as you recruit an outside candidate, one of the things that you're going to do is only see the best of that person unless you do a very, very, very complete due diligence reference check and find somebody who's willing to really tell you if a candidate has some severe deficiencies. So one of the things that I'm trying to make a point about this is that don't discount the internal candidate just because you know a few of their areas of weakness or opportunities for growth. All of us have those, and the candidate that you hire outside will also have them. The one advantage that an internal candidate has that you might want to consider is that they've already been part of the culture, the process, the procedure. They have a knowledge base around the children. They understand what you might expect as a building level leader. So I would pose to you, don't quickly dismiss an internal candidate because the external looks much better on paper or within the interview process. One of the things that I would like to discuss for a second with you is this whole idea around the professional organization. And the professional organization is very important in the recruitment process in that you can oftentimes post with no charge ads for positions in various organizations. For instance, there might be a website for a local elementary school principals organization or high school principals organization, or maybe there is a superintendent's organization that offers a want to add part of their website. I would also say that one of the things that we often forget about when we're recruiting is the idea that we should let our staff know about the openings that are occurring, and sometimes we don't do that consciously. We expect people to understand that or know that, and oftentimes they don't. They can be an effective recruiting agent for you. They may know people, they may have family members, there may be any number of connections that they have that can help you in their recruitment process. The other place that I would suggest that we sometimes forget about as recruitment managers is that we will receive many unsolicited applications, resumes, and so on. keep in mind that those are go-getters who are out and working diligently to obtain a position. Keep a file of those people who are sending you in material. They can be a fruitful source of candidates for a position. Moving on to the next slide. Advertising the position vacancies is something that is changing rapidly. And the reason that I say that is that in my experience, newspaper ads are relatively expensive. And I would suggest further that dependent on the number of openings that you have in the district, it's going to greatly affect whether or not you want to use newspapers as a recruitment tool. If you have lots of them, I think that a box ad of some form with a bunch of ads in it is an effective tool. I'm not discounting a box ad for individual positions, especially dependent on areas where there are severe shortage of candidates, but keep in mind that there are a lot of more cost-effective ways to recruit today. One of the things I would suggest you is don't forget really local papers and quote penny savers or ad newspapers. What they can do is, for low cost, spread within your immediate local area the needs for you as a recruiting agent. The other thing I would suggest to you is that this is a great avenue for recruiting support staff, for instance, food service, custodial mechanics, and other such types of workers, because they will continually peruse those as they show up in their mailboxes. One of the things that is in the textbook is about recruitment brochures. One of the things that I would suggest you is that you design one of those for your school or for your district that you can use over and over. In other words, some form of boilerplate. And in this, you can put repetitive information, statistics, demographics, and certainly brag about yourself as a potential employer. Moving on to the next page. Technology has had a huge impact on recruitment, and you probably know that personally, looking for positions. One of the first places that we look now is on the web. I know that I've done that. That's, when I was looking for my position at Coastal, that's where I found it. The opening was on the web. I would point out to you that many schools have their own websites now. Almost all do. It's huge. It's grown so much, so quickly, in the sense of schools and districts having their own websites. It's grown exponentially. So not only do candidates use this more and more to solicit information about the district and what openings are available or what potential openings may come about, but I would suggest to you again that this might be a place for you to call out from the myriad of candidates you will get for a position real viable candidates. Because if somebody hasn't taken the time to go on to your website to prepare for their interview, and you certainly can pose them some interview questions that will show whether or not they have done this. I think it's a real question now if somebody doesn't do that. So I would think that put in your interviewing question bank things around your website which will show whether or not the candidate has visited you. There are a number of new items that are popping up all the time. Monster places like that where you can post your resume, Websumes where you can post a electronic resume, social networks. Those are places that now you can now recruit. I would suggest that that's an area that you begin to explore, and perhaps there's even a place for something like a Facebook page for your school in terms of recruitment, or YouTube videos which show the culture of your school so that it appears or shows candidates your employment parameters in a very positive way. I'm going on to the next page. What are the implications for small and medium-sized school districts? Well, I think that if, as a superintendent of what would have been termed a small or a medium-sized school district, I think that the links between the building level and the district are certainly very close in terms of dealing with recruitment. It's something that you're talking about constantly. Personnel issues are certainly right there on the surface, and since you don't have large human resource departments, everyone is dealing with that. So I think my point is that keep in mind that for small and medium school districts, the principal, curriculum coaches, those types of positions that may be a little bit more foreign for those who have worked in large districts, there will be a much more intimate relationship in terms of recruitment and hiring. And one of the things that I would also point out to the small and medium school districts is that oftentimes you are competing against larger school districts who have more resources, may even pay better. So one of the things that you need to be very cognizant of and constantly working on is how do you sell yourself when you're competing with those other types of organizations. And there is a certain charm to smaller and medium school districts in terms of the intimacy of the leadership with the staff, the intimacy between staff and knowing the community. There's any number of items that can be leveraged as an advantage versus maybe the more impersonal culture, more impersonal atmosphere of the larger districts. Brag about it when you're recruiting. To a lot of people, this is a very attractive thing. I'm moving on to the next slide. The impact of Generation Y on recruitment, well, I think that we've discussed a lot of that already, in the sense that technology is a huge tool in the toolbox for recruiting Generation Y employees. I will leave the rest of that to your reading in Rebor.